Hello fellow creators, my name is Terry Jones and I am going to do this little bird in collage. So the first thing that I did is I applied matte medium to a piece of basically a little bigger than 5 by 7 piece of watercolor paper. And here you can see me applying matte medium to the back of a gel plate print and to the front. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to continue layering, tearing and layering, finding pieces. I had already collected pieces that I liked the color of. So now what I do is I just start fairly intuitively putting the pieces down. I want it a little darker in the bottom, a little lighter at the top. And I'm going to continue to overlay a variety of pieces. I like, what I want to find is things that have a shape I like and things that have a great pattern, mimicking in some ways that background you see on the bird with some dappled light in the background. And I'm using a variety of papers. I'm using papers that are solid, like a rice paper. That is the Sketchpad rice paper by Yasumota. And I am also using some other rice papers, some deli papers, and all sorts of things. The brush I'm using is a filbert by Princeton, I think. I like the Princeton Catalyst projects and the filberts and a lot of what Princeton has for brushes. This one's a bristle brush, but it's a very soft bristle brush. So I just keep on exploring, and then eventually I gotta go dry it. So I think I'm about a second from drying it. So here I come back again. There's a few more things I'm going to put on it. I've decided that I want just a few more. And again, that sense of light I'm looking. So now for the sense of light, a lot of times you see me using these transparent papers so that they will show a little bit of what's underneath, but not all of it. And the other thing that I know is I'm going to be putting a bird on top of all of this. So this is just a background. I always tell my students when I'm doing live workshops, this is just a background. It's okay. So I'm going away. Now at some point I dry it. Now I am drawing my bird on the image where I want it. I don't have to make it central. I'm just drawing it on. Then I'm going to take some white and paint it in. So I will paint it a little bit in with the white because I want to use this mulberry paper, and I'm using the mulberry paper basically without anything on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm gently trying to tear the mulberry paper. The mulberry paper, you sometimes have problems tearing it, but because it has all of the fibers in it, and I got a little bit of marks on it, but it's all okay. So now I am thinking and I'm going through all of my papers. I put aside all of these papers trying to decide which one is going to work for me. So here I'm trying out a color, and sometimes I'll try out colors that don't end up being the color that I'm going to use. So I'm trying out different colors. I am pulling, thinking. So I really like that color for the underneath green feathers, so I'm going to pull out some of those, just stick it on the bird and say, well, maybe I'll get back to that later. And this process is one of the really fun parts for me. My secret, though, is don't get too overwhelmed. Don't pull out too many different pieces. Just pull out your colors that you're interested in possibly using, and don't pull out too many of them. Here I'm trying on another color, and I think in the end I don't use that one. I put it down and then I pull it back up. But I finally decided that I better at least get my white piece down. So on the back, on the front, all over, let me place this in. This mulberry paper is very porous, So it just kind of disappears into your piece, but it also has a lot of fibers on it, so it looks like it's very feathery. So again, trying on more pieces. I just don't know. That one looks really red. And so I keep on going through my pile. Not quite sure. Here, I put that down. Does it work? No. Okay, so this one I'm liking some of the colors in. So let's try, oh, I like that much better. So let's see, tearing it off by hand to try to get it a little more feathery at the end. And I'm sure that you all know that if you tear in one direction, you'll have a white edge, and if you tear in the other direction, you will end up with a not white edge. So I work with that a little bit, especially when I'm putting my furry critters together, because they are, sometimes I want a little bit of a feathery white edge on them. So I am hand tearing this because I don't want it to look too precise, and just placing it in. There are artists that do their whole painting and do an underpainting in acrylic, and that's not me. I like to do this more intuitive. Let me paint with pieces of paper. I am piecing together with my pieces of paper these little critters. So I'm taking smaller pieces, I'm overlaying them on other pieces. I'm trying to keep the rhythm of the feathers. If you look in the top, you'll see that there's a rhythm of the feathers in the painting. So I'm trying to mimic that with my pieces of paper. If I was drawing with a brush, I would probably try to mimic them with specific brush strokes in directions, and instead what I'm trying to do is mimic it with the with little pieces of paper. And I just build. I build and build and build until I get down what I want down. Now I think I'm going to work on some of the green areas. I had found this piece that I really liked for the green areas. And when I put something down, it's not, I can always cover it up with something else. I don't, it's not my final whatsoever. So here I am. I'm going to start looking at my blues because I want to do some feathers for the blues. And I found this cutoff sheet that had some really nice dark blues in. So I start working on my blues, and I'm finding different colors. Again, at this point I'm not placing them in, I'm not gluing them down. I am just working with my colors and finding out what I have. This was a piece of the nice rice paper, so I wanted the soft edges working. You can see me tearing it for the soft edges. And now I'm pulling another piece where I don't want the soft edges working as much, laying more pieces down, and figuring it out. So I figured out that I need to put something else down. Didn't like that. Let's see what happens if I tear a little bit of this in. I'm kind of liking that better. I like the going across a little bit. So here again, I'm just working in my space. And this jelly paper, the bird itself is just ever so slightly tacky. So this little deli paper that I'm using will kind of sit down, and it will also absorb enough that I don't really always have to paint both sides of it to get it to work. And I don't particularly want it to be transparent, hence I don't really necessarily want to paint both sides of it. In order to get transparency on most of my rice and deli papers, when I paint both sides it works. But as I said, this paper is so thin that, and the surface was tacky that I was putting it on. So what I was able to do after I did that was to just place everything down with a coat of the gel on top of it, the matte medium. I think I was using, yeah, I was using matte medium. So again, hand placing different pieces, finding my way through. I'm adding the greens back in that I had kind of decided I liked before, and now I'm adding some greens back in, and trying to get a little bit of a curve, I think, on one of those shoulders, or the curve of its head up there. And it's very, very, very little bit of dark up there. So, but I'm putting it in the hopes, and then I will cover it up with a little bit of a light. So I'm working on that, working on getting more little pieces in, working on the shoulder. So I don't have a perfect plan when I start doing this. I am more of an intuitive, let me see what I can get working out here. And now I'm trying on the face, and I had a hard time with the face, and in the end I think I just ended up with a piece of gold mulberry paper, because I just had the most difficult time. So let me put the beak on and see what it looks like. Well, that didn't work. So let me put the beak on a different way. Let me use my tweezers. That helps tremendously. Tweezers are great. So here I am getting the beak on, thinking that that may help me define the head a little more. Now off camera I put in the little head. As I said, I used a little piece of the mulberry paper with just a tiny bit of gold on it to just kind of get my toning for the head. And as you see, I talked about earlier, putting it over the little dark blue in the very top background. And now I had toned a little bit of that mulberry paper blue, so that I could get some shadow areas and some blue areas. So now that I've put some shadows and some blue areas in, I've decided that I have to get a little more feathers in the actual bird. So what you see me doing is I'm trying to play with a little bit of again, this mulberry paper. And what I've discovered is, in order to get it to really feather the way I want it, it has to be pretty red, or pretty wet. So I am pulling off slightly wet pieces of this mulberry paper that I've put this cad yellow in, I think, and I am overlaying them on the wing to try to get some depth in the wing. So working with this paper, I am, it's wet, and I keep on tearing it, but what I discovered is that I really didn't want to work too wet, so I kind of laid it aside and let it dry. Well, I keep on changing my mind and trying, but I had actually laid this aside for a little while and let it dry, so that it had its little pieces. And now I'm going to work on the branches. So I'm pretty much happy with the bird itself. I'm going to do most of the details in the later portions of it. I will do most of the details with Posca pen and markers on the face. So now I'm laying in little pieces of paper for the branches, cutting very thin pieces, laying them in. I was going to I have to put the feet in too, so I got to set the bird on something. I wasn't fond of the picture of what it was. And so here I am working with finding leaves. I cut out some leaf shapes and put some leaves in, and I am working on getting more shapes around the little critter. And it's just the same thing I've been doing. Back and forth, pieces of paper, down on the paper, and all is well. And now I'm dealing with some of my final marks. So I've got most of what I like down. I've decided I need just a little more of the yellow in places, highlighting things. I'm going to fairly soon switch to using some Posca pencils. I used a matte to see what things were, and I realized I've got a really straight line in that corner which won't work, so eventually I'm going to have to adjust to that. And I realized I really want some whiter whites in its breast, so again I'm just putting another layer. This time I have a little piece, there's a little bit of real white that I painted on the mulberry paper, just a tiny hint. As you can, I'm struggling a bit to make the mulberry paper fuzzy because I did not tear it before I dried it, so it was a little challenging. So I'm finding I have to use my scissors to get the really tiny pieces, and I'm adding another layer of light up on the top of its wing where there's a bit of highlights in there. I want to highlight my way through with a little bit of this white mulberry paper. And again, as I keep on saying, I'm painting with paper. I am trying to find things that are going to work for my particular image that I'm trying to recreate here in paper, in my vision of what the little bird is. So now I'm going to fix that corner with a little piece of some more paper. I end up in the end making it darker and rounder with a few more images, so I feel like it'll work better in my painting. So now I'm starting with my mark making in the very end, and it was too the Posca pens. Posca pens are never, it seems, sharp enough for me, and I want to use acrylics, and I have to find an acrylic pen that really works well with a fine point. Through this whole thing, I think I was complaining to myself, I want a finer point acrylic pen, even though I've got that. Now that one's one of the acrylic painter pens, and it's much finer, but yeah. So this is a gold Pilot pen, and I'm putting just a little bit of highlights in with the gold Pilot pen. And then I switch to the white acrylic pen, and I start putting in some of the highlights with the white acrylic pen. I use a lot of pens in the face because the face, I'm desperately trying to get what I want in the face. And I want it to look expressive. And so now I'm working on my eye. I'm using a Sharpie, which is fine point enough, but it's not acrylic. So I'm using a Sharpie, and now I'm using a blue acrylic painter paint, and it was too much, and I blotted it out. And then I'm using the white over the blue, and I am working back and forth to try to get what I want happening. If I lay something down and I don't like it, a lot of times I'll soften it by that pull-up process that you see. And but I want to get an expressive face. So I switched to a brown. No, didn't work as well. Well, no, here's more brown. And switched to a light brown, and here I go again. More marks. And different people will go to different levels at this process, and I find that sometimes I think I usually go one too many strokes, but it is okay. Now I'm looking for a orange, and best I could find was a peach, but I put a little bit on its legs to lighten up its legs a little bit, and I am continuing to work on it. This is a beige, and I was really happy with ending up being able to tone down a little bit of the feathers and be able to hand put in a little bit more of the feathers in the face. If I had done this bird much larger, I probably would have done the feathers in pieces of paper, but I didn't. So I was stuck. I used a little bit of the blue to outline a little of the feathers, and I am working with just another little bit of another color, the Sharpie, trying to get a little bit more working with the Sharpie, and there I go. So I'm liking lots and lots of it. I'm going to, I think, in the very end up with some gold around it. Don't remember. Oh, that's what I did. So I wanted some really little tiny black things around the eyes, and I finally gave up. And I put a little bit of the Posca pen in a dot there, and then I went in with a very, very, very fine brush and got my absolute finest details. And it was crazy. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.